Story 1. I read a while ago about a form of dementia where you don't go along with and believe the delusions, and you are aware you are going insane. It is supposed to be really terrifying. Possibly Lewy body dementia? Story 2. I have a friend with bipolar disorder, and while I love her immensely, even when she is very difficult to be with, being close, you witness the roller coaster they go through and join it. You want to help, but you can't. You feel yourself pushed away when they have it most difficult. Luckily, she's always extremely grateful when I'm still there when things are better. But then it goes back to being difficult. Story 3. I have obsessive-compulsive disorder, and it is so different from all of the stereotypes presented about it. Honestly, I have never seen a depiction of obsessive-compulsive disorder that fully encapsulates how hard it is to just exist. You are fighting your own brain the whole time, and you are aware of it. It is not like a schizoaffective disorder where the beliefs are real to them. For most people with obsessive-compulsive disorder, we know what we are thinking is irrational. We know we did not cause 9/11 or whatever, but we quite literally cannot stop thinking it. Story 4. I think maybe something like borderline personality disorder can be really tough, just because it affects so many aspects of your relationships and sense of self. But it's important to remember that mental health struggles don't define a person. Help and healing are always possible with the right support. Story 5. Too many unbelievably horrible mental diseases exist, but one that is really bad and has been used as torture to prisoners of war is akathisia. It is where you feel constant, unbelievable terror and can't stop moving. This goes on past the point of exhaustion because sleep is next to impossible due to the terror and the need to constantly move. They eventually become so exhausted from sleep deprivation that they become delirious and can only sleep for very short periods before waking up back in their state of terror, constant need to move, and delirium. People with akathisia often commit suicide to escape. Story 6. Body integrity disorder describes the extremely rare phenomenon of persons who desire the amputation of one or more healthy limbs or who desire paralysis. Some of these persons mutilate themselves. Others ask surgeons for an amputation or for the transection of their spinal cord. Story 7. As a support worker who is around an array of different people with mental health conditions, borderline personality disorder is not only horrible for the person, but can be complete chaos for others in their life. Paranoid schizophrenia, with persistently being out of touch with reality and psychosis, can be devastating and impact almost every aspect of their life. Story 8. Narcissism. You can't prove they are narcissistic, you can't convince them to get therapy because a narcissistic person never accepts flaws, you can't ignore them because they come at you harder. I honestly feel defeated against those kinds of people. They can intentionally destroy someone. Narcissistic parents always make mentally sick children. If not another narcissistic child, it will be a paranoid child or anything. I feel like it's the worst mental disease because as frequent as it gets, you can't fight it like other mental disorders. You can't cure it because that person will create so many barriers but will break yours easily. They are so entitled and poisonous, like a fly stuck in a spider's trap, dying slowly. Story 9. The worst I have seen is schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder. Growing up, my best friend's uncle had schizophrenia and killed his mom because he thought she was Jesus. When he was in the hospital afterward, he was pouring food down the drain to feed Satan. Borderline personality disorder, however, has affected me more personally. My son's mom has it, and it has been an absolute nightmare to try to co-parent with her. She truly lives in a world of her own imagination, and her well-being is more important than her son's. She has done everything from generally gaslighting him to trying to manipulate him and the authorities to get her husband out of trouble when he assaulted him to just pulling him out of school one semester and telling him he does not have to go. I spend a good portion of my emotional capital trying to get him back to a healthy place after she does something crazy. Over and over. Story 10. Anxiety disorder. It can seriously affect perception of the world around you, cause major trust issues, and make you on edge about very little things brought upon by trauma. Story 11. I don't know if it's the worst, but complex post-traumatic stress disorder is torturing me. I was diagnosed with it a few months ago. Nobody I meet feels safe to me. Stupid sounds scare me. I don't sleep for so many reasons, or if I do, it's not well. Anxiety and depression are like a seesaw. I know someone, though, who experiences treatment-resistant major depression, and seeing how that affects him, I think that might be the worst. Story 12. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Mostly because I can never just breathe. For as long as I know, I've been scared, hypervigilant, focused on everyone but myself, focused on making sure no one, especially my histrionic mother with borderline personality disorder, would become upset. By age 8, I was cooking and cleaning the house. I wasn't allowed on the same couch as my parents and brother. My dad thought it was because I liked having my own seat. I wasn't allowed to eat unless everyone else had eaten. I couldn't take a second plate until everyone else had a chance. I wasn't allowed to show my report card because it would make my brother feel bad. They didn't come to any of my graduations. Not my grammar schools, not my university bachelors, not my cum laude masters. I never mattered. As a mom now, I don't eat until everyone else has eaten. I give my kids my food if they show any interest. I don't buy myself clothes or shoes unless I have to and cry if the shoes are over €8. It feels like I'm taking away from them. For my birthday, I ask for stuff they like. My husband bought me an electric bike as a gift since my 25-year-old bike broke down completely. As a result, I bought my kids and husband new bikes to make sure I had less. I only thrive, on suffering. My husband and kids are awesome, but I'm not a human being. I'm a scared, scarred, empty shell of what could have been a human being. Story 13. Bipolar disorder. My mom has it, and her manic episodes are so difficult to deal with. I've ended up having to go no contact just to save my own well-being. Story 14. Anhedonia mixed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and autism. They make you useless. I've been battling all these for years, and it's been hell. I don't let them define me, though, and I'm constantly trying to get better. Story 15. There isn't really a worst mental disorder. Each one is challenging in its own way. What matters most is offering support, understanding, and access to treatment. Story 16. Anorexia nervosa. The person starves themselves while constantly getting sicker and sicker, but all the person sees is how fat they must be. Eventually, after enough starvation, the body eats itself until there's nothing left and you are a husk of what and who you used to be. When you are really deep into it, your body and mind are only consumed with losing weight and the rules the eating disorder voice created to avoid gaining weight or recovery. Story 17. I was married to a narcissist with borderline personality disorder. What an awful combination. On the surface, they seem completely normal. But for those around them, life is hell. Story 18. I work in care, so I've seen a lot of disorders from a lot of clients. Bipolar disorder is easily the worst I've experienced. One week they're fine, like you or me. The next week, they can be defecating on themselves, urinating everywhere, staying up all night, eating thousands upon thousands of calories a day, not showering, talking literally 24 hours a day, and no one around them gets any peace and quiet. It is the single most mentally draining mental disorder I've dealt with in 7 years. Schizophrenia is nothing compared to it, in my experience. This is quite obviously severe bipolar disorder. Story 19. I have had dealings with someone with malignant narcissistic personality disorder. The most charming woman on the surface and would genuinely pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Her husband left her after he found out about her multiple affairs, and after that, she accused him of abuse and successfully reduced contact with his children to almost nothing. I see her comment on groups, offering empathy and advice for domestic violence. Behind the scenes, her messages to him are in line with an abuser, and watching him recover from the abuse she put him through during their marriage, while she convinces everyone that she was his victim, is genuinely harrowing. Story 20. Hearing about schizophrenia from a friend with a mild case was pretty scary. Before talking to him, I thought it was about hearing voices, but that's not really it. Your brain is just bypassing your ears entirely and telling you that there are voices. Then, if you ask someone else whether they heard the voice too, your brain will tell you they said yes, even if they said no. Story 21. Pedophilic disorder, currently classified in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, as a psychiatric disorder, is also known as pedophilia. We all understand why it is awful, But the worst part is that most experts agree there is no effective treatment. It cannot be cured, and there are no long-term effective treatments except ones to protect victims, such as the isolation of the perpetrator. There is nothing to reduce intrusive thoughts or the attraction to minors for the person with the disorder. Medications do not help. Therapy is an option, but the success rate at present is low and even lower in the long run. There is nothing you can do medically to make a pedophile any less of a pedophile, even if the person with the disorder does not want to have those thoughts and urges. It is a psychiatric disorder with absolutely no proven effective treatment that achieves long-term results. People with the disorder cannot be part of society. They cannot interact with people in normal places. They pose too great a risk to children who might be in those spaces. They cannot interact with their families if minors are part of that family. There is nothing that can be done to fix it except to keep them isolated to protect potential victims. Story 22. Childhood dementia is a progressive disease for which we have no idea of the cause or how to treat it. It worsens as it eventually reduces the child to a drooling state. Absolutely heartbreaking. Story 23. It is estimated that as much as 20% of the homeless population in the United States have a form of schizophrenia. Some studies have it up to 60%. There is something particularly evil about a disorder that makes you distrust everyone who cares about you and every step made to help you. You and your brain are supposed to be a team. The betrayal is devastating. Story 24. My dad worked for 35 years as a vocational rehabilitation job placement counselor, so he worked with every disability out there. I asked him in the 1990s which was harder to place, and he said schizophrenia. I asked him the same question 20 years later, and he said the same thing. Story 25. I've worked in mental health for many years, and I think paranoid schizophrenia is the worst. The person suffers, they never feel safe, the medications have a lot of side effects, and they are in a constant state of hypervigilance. It usually starts in a person's early 20s, and their lives are never the same. Schizoaffective disorder is also terrible. It's kind of like a mix of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The part that really is tragic is that their moods go back and forth. Sometimes they feel a little better, and then they sink back into the delusions, hallucinations, and other symptoms. Story 26. Worst in terms of the amount of suffering inflicted on the experiencer. Any situation where a person is driven to take their own life, that's a level of suffering that's hard to imagine. In terms of total suffering inflicted, narcissists tend to occupy positions of power and are therefore in a better position to inflict widespread suffering through their decisions. So definitely narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder are contenders. Losing a loved one over time to their illness inflicts significant amounts of suffering on the people who love that person, so schizophrenia, dysmorphias, and similar conditions. Story 27. Depends on the severity. For example, someone could have a less severe degree of schizophrenia versus someone who could have extreme cases of bipolar disorder. It doesn't mean one is worse than the other, but the degree of the effect and that individual's coping ability to balance out the disorder. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, since mental disorders can debilitate different people to different degrees. Story 28. Aren't they all just horrible? To be at the mercy of something out of your control that isn't curable, only treatable? Which then puts you at the mercy of a medical system that is exhausting and useless at times. I'm voting for all, however, if choosing one, I'd go with bipolar. I chose this because of my beautiful daughter that has to fight it every single day of her life. Her well-being depends on receiving proper medication and doctors. However, many times over the years, both have failed her. Story 29. My mom got tick-borne encephalitis, a disease that basically makes your brain swell and press against your skull, leaving you with permanent brain damage. Since my mom had it, her narcissistic tendencies worsened, all empathy for others left her mind, and she started to believe in conspiracies and did quite awful things to me mentally as I grew up. For example, she faked a suicide attempt and had stolen medication from the hospital she worked at, which she would put in my drink or food if I became pregnant. It wasn't abortion medication. It was another medication with miscarriage as a symptom. Story 30. Perhaps Cotard's delusion. You believe you are already dead, so when you have it, you don't take care of yourself properly. For example, you may believe that since you are dead, you don't need to eat, and you wind up starving to actual death. Story 31. I live with a schizophrenic, and I would say that he takes medication, but it's a slippery slope. The tiniest thing can put him off. His is all audio. Watching him suffer through hearing voices and trying to quiet them, knowing he can't control it, is just painful to watch. The times he seems to be doing well on the outside, he'll tell me it feels like he has a wet towel over his head constantly. I just can't imagine. I also suffer from a mild form of post-traumatic stress disorder, and it wasn't something I understood until I went through it. You don't even realize it until something triggers it, and then you spiral back into a place you don't want to be. And mine is mild. I can't imagine having severe post-traumatic stress disorder that affected my everyday life.